Germany is a profound paradox wrapped in a border that never stopped moving. It is the land of sublime poets and devastating conquerors, of breathtaking precision and chaotic fragmentation. For over 1,000 years, there was no such thing as a unified Germany on a map, yet the people who lived in this heartland of Europe continuously dictated the fate of the entire continent. What most people overlook is that Germany was not born out of a natural, peaceful desire to be a single nation, but out of a desperate, centuries-long struggle to simply avoid being erased by its neighbors. This is the story of how scattered, warring tribes evolved into the powerhouse industrial engine of modern Europe. But to understand how they did it, we have to look past the modern stereotypes of efficiency and order. We have to look at the deep, historical scars that forged them. Let's start with the land itself, because in Germany, geography was absolute destiny. If you look at a map of Europe, Germany sits directly in the center, acting as a massive geographical crossroads connecting the east to the west and the north to the south. To the north lie the cold, flat plains stretching all the way to Russia, and to the south stand the impenetrable, jagged peaks of the Alps. This central location created a fascinating contradiction that would define their entire history. The great rivers like the Rhine, the Elbe, and the Danube acted as the superhighways of the ancient world, bringing immense wealth, trade, and cultural exchange right into the heart of the region. But this very openness was also their greatest curse. Without natural borders like massive mountain ranges or wide oceans to protect them on the east and west, the Germanic lands were perpetually vulnerable to invasion from every side. It's hard to say if this constant state of deep insecurity is what forged the legendary German focus on security and order, but it certainly forced them to adapt quickly. They couldn't and oppose to rely on nature for defense, so they had to rely on stone walls, harsh discipline, and eventually, pure military might. The land gave them the perfect tools to prosper, but it also painted a giant target on their backs. To find the origins of this resilient culture, we have to go back tens of thousands of years, to a time when Europe was still locked in the grip of the Ice Age. In the Neander Valley near modern-day Dusseldorf, archaeologists discovered the remains of some of our earliest human relatives, proving that this harsh landscape has been contested territory since the dawn of humanity. As the ice retreated, thick, dark, and impenetrable forests swallowed the land. Imagine this, standing in the middle of the ancient Hercynian forest, where the canopy is so thick that daylight barely touches the forest floor. You are a member of a Germanic tribe, living in a small wooden clearing, surrounded by a wilderness that the civilized world viewed with pure terror. To the Roman Empire, expanding from the warm Mediterranean, these forests were the end of the world, a place of monsters and untamable barbarians. But this is where things get complicated. The Romans tried to conquer these lands, pushing their disciplined legions deep into the green abyss. In the year 9 AD, a Germanic chieftain named Arminius, who had been raised and trained by the Romans, betrayed his former masters. He lured 3 elite Roman legions into the boggy depths of the Teutoburg forest. Imagine the sheer panic of those Roman soldiers, weighed down by heavy armor, sinking into the wet mud as arrows rained down from an enemy they cannot oppose. Even see. For 3 days, the tribesmen ambushed the Romans, annihilating them almost to the last man. It was a psychological blow from which Rome never truly recovered. What's interesting here is that this victory didn't end oppose to create a united German nation. Instead, it preserved their fragmentation, allowing dozens of independent tribes to continue living in their isolated, fiercely independent worlds. As the centuries rolled on and the Roman Empire collapsed, a new kind of power began to emerge from the chaos of the Dark Ages. Great dynasties rose, most notably under Charlemagne, who was crowned emperor of the Romans in the year 800, effectively birthing what would become the Holy Roman Empire. But don't let the grand name fool you. This was not a centralized empire like Rome. It was a dizzying patchwork of hundreds of independent duchies, bishoprics, and free cities, all theoretically answering to an emperor but practically doing whatever they pleased. Power in this era was not about absolute control. It was a constant, exhausting negotiation between the emperor and local princes. People obeyed because they shared a common language and a loose cultural identity, but their true loyalty belonged to their local lord, not some distant crown. This created a profound psychological rift in the German identity that lasted for centuries. They were part of a grand imperial dream, yet fiercely protective of their local autonomy. This tension fueled incredible cultural diversity and economic competition, turning cities like Nuremberg and Cologne into powerhouses of trade and art. But it also meant that Germany lacked a single, beating heart. They were a giant with 1,000 small brains, incapable of acting as one. But here's the problem: this system was already breaking. And no one could stop what came next. The delicate balance that held this fractured empire together was about to be obliterated by a single piece of paper nailed to a church door, plunging the land into a darkness it had never seen before. In 1517, a monk named Martin Luther challenged the ultimate authority of the Catholic Church, sparking the Protestant Reformation. This was and oppose just a theological debate. It was a match dropped into a powder keg of social and political tension. When Luther translated the Bible into German, he gave the people a unified language, but he also gave them a reason to kill each other. The simmering religious and political rivalries finally boiled over in 1618 into the 30 Years and Oppose War. This conflict was the ultimate existential crisis for the German lands. It was and oppose a noble clash of kings. It was a relentless, grinding apocalypse that consumed the center of Europe. Mercenary armies roamed the countryside, living off the land, burning villages, and murdering civilians regardless of their faith. Famine and disease followed the armies, and in some regions, over half the population was wiped out. There are horrifying accounts from this time of people driven to cannibalism just to survive. This was not just a war. It was survival. When the dust finally settled with the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, the German lands were a smoking ruin, physically devastated and politically more divided than ever before. Out of the ashes of this destruction, a new power began to rise in the northeast, Brandenburg, Prussia. Surrounded by enemies and possessing poor, sandy soil, Prussia had to innovate to survive. The Prussian kings became obsessed with discipline, efficiency, and military power, turning their entire society into a machine designed for war. It was often said that while other states possess an army, the Prussian army possessed a state. This created another massive paradox in the German story: the rise of a hypermilitaristic state that simultaneously fostered some of the greatest minds in human history, like Immanuel Kant and Ludwig van Beethoven. What looked like strength was already decay, as the old Holy Roman Empire finally collapsed under the weight of Napoleon's invading armies in the early 19th century. But from that humiliation, a fierce new desire for actual unity was born among the German people. Enter Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor of Prussia. Bismarck understood that the German people and Otto's desire for a nation-state could be used to expand Prussian power. Through a series of masterfully orchestrated wars against Denmark, Austria, and finally France, Bismarck forged the modern German Empire in 1871. Unity built the nation, but it also nearly destroyed it. This new, unified Germany was an industrial titan and a military juggernaut, but it was born with a profound sense of insecurity, still fearing encirclement by hostile neighbors. This toxic mix of immense power and deep-seated paranoia directly fueled the catastrophe of the First World War. The trauma of trench warfare created a hardened, brutalized generation, and the defeat in 1918 shattered the German Empire, leaving the nation economically ruined and psychologically broken. In this vacuum of despair, a dark, twisted ideology took hold. Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party manipulated the ancient fears of vulnerability and the desire for absolute order, leading Germany into the abyss of the Second World War and the unimaginable horror of the Holocaust. This was and oppose just a political failure. It was a total moral collapse of a society that had prided itself on its high culture. It's hard to say if any nation can truly recover from producing such darkness, but the cost of this era of progress and power was the devastation of Europe and the slaughter of millions of innocent lives. In 1945, Germany was once again a smoking ruin, but this time, it was also sliced in half. The Cold War turned the country into the ultimate frontline of a global ideological struggle. physically manifested by the brutal concrete and barbed wire of the Berlin Wall. Imagine the perspective of a civilian in Berlin in 1961, waking up to find soldiers running wire through their neighborhood, suddenly cut off from family and friends just a few streets away. For decades, Germans lived in two entirely different worlds, the capitalist West and the communist East. The transformation back into a single nation was messy, painful, and deeply uncertain. When the Berlin Wall finally came down in 1989, amidst tears and sledgehammers, the joy was real, but so was the immense cost of reunification. Merging a broken communist economy with a thriving capitalist one created deep social and economic fractures that persist to this day. Maybe this wasn't Appo's strength at all, but a desperate, exhausting effort to stitch together a broken identity that had been shattered by its own ambition. Today, Germany stands as the undisputed economic powerhouse of Europe, a global leader in technology, engineering, and green energy. Yet, if you look closely, the ancient forces that shaped its history are still very much alive. Its central location still makes it the indispensable bridge between East and West, carrying both the immense economic benefits and the heavy geopolitical burdens that come with that position. The country remains deeply cautious about the exercise of military power, haunted by the ghosts of the 20th century, yet constantly pressured by its allies to take a stronger leadership role. What's interesting here is that the modern German state has channeled its historical obsession with order and security into building a robust social welfare system and a powerhouse export economy. They have learned to survive not through conquest, but through collaboration. So maybe this story was never just about a nation finding its borders, but about the terrifying, beautiful, and deeply human struggle to define an identity in a world that refuses to stand still. Germany shows us the heights of human achievement and the absolute depths of human depravity, proving that the line between the two is razor thin. If its history has taught us anything, it's that nations don't fall when they are weak, but when they believe they cannot. And as the world enters a new era of uncertainty, the central heart of Europe is still beating, still adapting, and still reminding us of the immense cost and the incredible resilience required to endure.